If I start on the regular time, then I've got to wait for the 60 other 3 people to stagger in. David to hobble on down to his spot with. You would think he would get over that knee thing a lot quicker than this, but it must be his age. He's just hobbling along there. So. I'm not saying a word about Amy. She can come in when she wants to. Everybody needs Elvis fabric. That would put somebody in the hospital. I'm not sure giving somebody Elvis fabric while they're in the hospital is an appropriate thing. I'm not sure about that. It is good to have everyone here this evening, even Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. Good to have everyone here this evening. Good to have you if you're joining us online. Thank you for doing that. Invite you to be with us every opportunity that you have. We'll be in Acts the 10th chapter tonight. Acts the 10th chapter. Would like to thank Steve for taking my class for me last week. We had an opportunity. We ran out to Oklahoma to visit my mom and dad. It was their 67th wedding anniversary, so we went to visit them, and was glad it was a successful trip. We got out there and got back, and when we left, I knew it was a successful trip because when I left, neither my brother nor my sister nor myself were mad at each other. So nobody left mad. So we think it was a good, successful trip. But it was good to be out there with them for their 67th wedding anniversary. And then we got to ask some questions about, some things that we hadn't asked before. And asked my mom. Corey said, "How long did y'all date?" And my mother said, 51 days. It's an odd story. My father was in the Navy, and his mother and my mother, they were working in a department store together, and she came in and asked a girl at the department store. She said, "My son is in the Navy. Would you write him so he'd have somebody to write to?" And that girl said, "No, I won't." And my mother spoke up and said, "Well, I'll write to him." And she said, "But you're already got a boyfriend." She said, "That's all right. I'll write to him anyway." So so they corresponded for a while. He said, "Well, I'm coming home for a while." Said, "Would you be willing to go out with me?" And she said, "Sure." And her boyfriend found out about that, and she said, "Well, it's not like I'm going to marry him. I'm just going to go out with him." 51 days later, they were married, and my father, being the romantic that he is, I said something to him about it. He said, here's the way he proposed. Because I'm not going to say my father watches how he spends his money, but this is the way he did it. He said my mother said he pulled off to the side of the road, and she kind of felt like maybe what he was going to end. So his proposal was this: "If I bought you a ring, would you wear it?" So, and I said something to him about it. He said, "I wasn't about to spend that kind of money if she wasn't going to say yes." So, but anyway, so they're still together and still in love because they still drive each other crazy. So I know it's in a lot of ways, but it was good to go out there and be with them for that. And I appreciate Steve taking my class so that I could do that. Appreciate that. Thank you. We'll be in the 10th chapter. I want to relate a couple of things to you before we get started with this. It may seem like I'm chasing a squirrel, but I'm not. One day, back long ago, when I actually used to occasionally go out and play golf, I was out playing golf by myself one day, which those of you who know the pitfalls of playing golf by yourself happened to me on one particular hole. I got up on the tee box, and it was a long straight hole. And I got up there and I was waiting because there was a threesome ahead of me, and they were on the green. But I was just standing on the tee box, and because it was so far down there wasn't really any chance of me driving the green or getting close. And so I look way down there, and they're going, "Go ahead, hit." Well, I don't know what happened, but buddy, I got a hold of that golf ball perfect. When it quit rolling, it was about 5 inches from the hole. And of course, I walked up there, and of course, they were just all standing around looking at it. And here's the way I approach it. I walked up and went, just tapped it in, reached in and said, thank you, and just walked on. I do this all the time, no big deal. What I really wanted to do is dance around a little bit. I didn't do that. But, you know what the worst thing is about that, though? I didn't have a friend there, one, who could testify to the fact that I'd done that. You share that with somebody and they go, yeah, okay. Sure you did. Sure you did. So no witnesses to that fact other than that threesome, and I don't even know who they were, but I just know somewhere to this day they're going, man, we saw a shot on this all right here that you wouldn't believe. But anyway. Second thing that happened odd to me was, as many of you know, for a long time I've been kind of an avid shooter and have been a part of a gun club, and I one day I was going by and I thought, I just want to stop in to the gun club and make sure everything's locked up and taken care of and like it's supposed to be. So I unlocked the gates and went down there and I walked down to the clubhouse and I walk out on the porch of the clubhouse, and there sitting in the gun rack is a gun. I'm looking around. There's nobody there. Okay. I walk over and I pick it up. And I look at the brand of gun that it is. And I know this gun. I know this brand. This is about a $28,000 shotgun. Now, compared to my $200 pawn shop shotgun, it's a little bit different. And I'm holding this gun that I know is in the $20,000 range. And I go, Lord, this is not fair. I don't know what kind of test you're trying to put me to here, but and really I did not have the inclination of saying, hey, I can hang on to this and who's going to know? I mean, we've got no security cameras here. Here's this gun. It's a nice one. That didn't cross my mind. But you know what I got the most aggravated about? I didn't have any shotgun shells with me. Because I thought, here's my one time that if I had a box of shells, I could shoot a $28,000 gun. Never going to happen again, because I'll guarantee you it's never going to happen again. But here's my chance to shoot a gun that's worth more than the vehicle that I'm driving. But I didn't even have a box of shells with me. If I had only had a box of shells with me. I found the name of the man who, in the logbook of who had been out there shooting, and I called his house and I said, is your husband home? She said, no, he's out at the range shooting. And I said, when he gets home, tell him I found his baby. And she goes, you found his baby? And I said, he'll know. And it wasn't long I got a phone call. I understand you have my baby. I said, yes, I do. So but we got his baby back home with him. But I don't know if you've ever been in those kind of situations where because of circumstance, you tell yourself, man, if I had only done this, or if I had only had this would turn out better. I left behind and if I'd only had that with me. If I had thought about bringing this along, that would have made all the difference. I could have done this or I could have done that. And you're in a situation where you are ill-prepared for what occurs. You know, when we look in the Scriptures, that's one thing that we don't have to worry about, is whether or not the Scriptures are going to leave us ill-prepared. When we look in the Scriptures, what does it say? That the Scriptures are written so that we can be what? Complete, thoroughly furnished. all good works, so that we'll have everything we need to be the type of individual that God wants us to be a child of God, that we'll have all the tools that will make us a child of God. All those things that are important. And we've all sat in classes and there's been questions that have come up that really the idea of what the answer to this question really doesn't amount to anything. That person who always wants to know, where did the sons of Adam and Eve, where did they get their wives? It doesn't matter to me because that's not a salvation issue, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time concerned about those kind of things. But those things that put us in the proper relationship with God, those things we don't have to worry about, because I don't have an empty toolbox that says, I only wish I had. If God had only told me this, then I would be able to figure this out. Or if the Spirit had only revealed this, then we would know what to do. When we start looking in the Scriptures and it's talking about, and we want to know what is acceptable worship unto God. The Scriptures tell us what's acceptable worship unto God. When the Scriptures talk, when we say, what is it that I have to do to be in the proper relationship with God, to receive salvation, to spend an eternity with Him? Scriptures tell us that. And so we don't have to come up short and say, if only, and I feel unprepared because I don't have all the tools or the information that I need. And the Scriptures don't leave us short. And God doesn't leave us short and say, good luck with this. I hope you find a way. I hope you find out the path, and good luck. It doesn't do that. The Scriptures let us know what it is that we need to be in that relationship, because it tells us from the very beginning God put this plan into place, and that He wants all men everywhere to come to a knowledge of Him. I mean, that's what He wants. And how foolish would it be for somebody to say, this is what I want for you, but, and I really do, I really want it for you, but I'm going to leave it up for you to figure it all out for yourself. If I really want that for you, I'm going to do everything I can to help you obtain that goal. And that's what Scriptures do for us. Now, why do I say all of that? Well, I say all of that because in chapter 10 we have a milestone or a big pillar, a marker of things getting ready to really change. And all of us, and I don't know whether to go through and read each verse or not, this chapter 10 and chapter 11 are very, very familiar to us because we're talking about Cornelius. And this is the time where, up until this point in time, officially, where do the Gentiles stand? Outside. They really haven't been invited in. Now, we know under the old law, there were some who were proselytes. And that was those who were outside of the Jewish religion, who were outside of Israel, that they had embraced the Jewish religion. They had embraced God as the Jews worshiped Him. And they would go so far even as to go and be circumcised. And they were proselytes. There were also those who followed and as best they could follow the Jewish religion, but they weren't circumcised. These were, and as we mentioned in here, it's going to talk about Cornelius, and it's going to say he is one that feared God. And in the Scriptures, when it's talking about somebody who's not a proselyte, but they are somebody who is following closely, it refers to them as somebody who fears God. And that's Cornelius. That's the situation he's in. Officially, the Gentiles are not a part of the kingdom. It really hasn't been open to them. Now, even though we know Paul, later on, it will say that he is the apostle to the Gentiles, it's not him who is involved here. We see a story here of a man who, when we read it, of all accounts, and like I said, this is such a familiar story to us. By all accounts, what we read, what kind of man is Cornelius? He's the man I want living next door to me. First of all, he's the leader of 100 Roman soldiers, and I think if we were having problems in the neighborhood, having him next door would be nice. It's kind of like having the police car parked next to your house. I think that would kind of hold down on things. I wouldn't mind him being my neighbor. But what kind of individual is he, the way he conducts himself? Even though, when we start talking, a lot of times when we start talking about somebody who is a military individual, right or wrong, a lot of times when we talk about somebody who is a career military person, what's the idea that we get sometimes? Okay. I find that we go one of two ways. We think a person, a career military person is a person of very high standards, or we don't think of them having much standards. One or the other. Cornelius, he is a man, by what he is described, he's a man of exceptional standards, isn't he? What does he do daily? He prays daily. I hope all of us fall into that category. I hope all of us could say about our own selves that there is not a day that passes that prayer is not offered on our behalf, that we don't pray. Here is a man who is outside of, and as Lonnie pointed out in this class one time, these individuals, even though as much as he's trying to practice what he knows, would he have been welcomed in the temple? No. He wouldn't have been welcome. And matter of fact, even though he's doing what he can, do you think he would have been welcomed by any Jewish brethren who would have said, hey, you're doing the best you can. I want to be your friend because I know you're trying. Matter of fact, it's even questions and, oh, wait a minute, what's this that you're talking to me? But as an individual, we see him as a person of integrity, a person of standards. He not only prays daily, but what does he also do? He gives alms to the poor. Hey, again, this is the person I want as my neighbor. This is the guy, when I'm out of town for some reason that I hadn't planned on, when I come back, my yard's mowed. On my way back, I'm not thinking, oh man, we get back home, that grass is going to be knee deep, and I'm going to have to go over it twice to get it all cut down, and then it's going to windrow up, and I'm going to have to rake it up, and y'all know. Jordan's laughing because Jordan knows what that windrow stuff looks like. He's been in. I'm not worried about it because I know when I get back, I'm going to go, man, somebody mowed my yard while I was gone. By the way, I was gone for almost a week, but that's a whole. Won't go into that. And somebody mowed my yard, so that's okay. Cornelius is that kind of man. And so Cornelius, he again, it says about the 9th hour or about 3 o'clock in the evening, he's doing what? He's praying. What happens? A voice speaks to him and says, Cornelius, and he says, Lord? Now, he's saying, God has heard your prayers. And there's a lot of discussion on here of, does God hear the prayers of a sinful man and all this kind of. Now, does he hear Cornelius' prayer? Does he recognize Cornelius' prayer? Does he recognize that Cornelius is praying? That's a whole nother discussion there. But I do know he's telling him God is aware of who you are and what you're doing. And what does he tell him? Now, to begin with, with the retelling, and a couple of retellings here, and you kind of put them all together, what is to the retelling, what do we gain? What is he told? All right, send to Joppa. There's a man named Simon Peter there. He's staying at the tanner's house. Send for him. And he'll do what? He's going to tell you what you need to do. And we've heard multiple lessons, and make this point, we'll move on. If Cornelius is such a good man, and Cornelius prays daily, Cornelius gives alms to the poor, and God recognizes that Cornelius is praying, what more does the man need? God knows him. He's a prayerful man. He's a giving man. He's a good moral man. What more does he need? And yet he's told, send for Peter so he can tell you what you need to do. And so immediately he calls in two of his men. He relates to them the story. He takes them into his confidence. So obviously he trusts these men. He's about to send them on a mission that's fairly important. So he takes them into his confidence and he relates to them exactly what has happened, and you need to go get Peter. And so they leave to go get him. Now, change the scenes, right? Now we find Peter. We understand who Peter is. We know the relationship Peter has with God. We know he is one of the apostles. We know he has the right relationship, that he has been with Christ during his teachings here upon the earth. He is now out spreading the gospel as he's supposed to. Peter is up on the roof, and he has, as the King James says, he has a trance or a vision. Now in his vision, every kid in this building at some time or another has made a little sheet that gets let down through something, little sheet. And Peter, this sheet descends out of heaven. And what's it full of? It's full of all kinds of animals. Because the pretext of this we get is when Peter goes up there, what? Peter's hungry. He's hungry, which would qualify most of us. Said he's hungry, but he's going to go ahead and pray because he's going to pray first. And so this sheet comes down. It's full of all kinds of animals, assortment here. And a voice from heaven says, take, kill, and eat. And Peter says, wait a minute, Lord. I have never eaten anything unclean. Peter is still in observance to the old covenant. In Leviticus, where it talks about, I believe it's Leviticus the 11th chapter. Leviticus the 11th chapter, where he talks about here's the things you can eat, the things you cannot eat. Here's what makes something clean. Here's what makes something unclean. But you can't eat of unclean animals. And Peter says, listen, I have never broken this covenant. This covenant of what you can eat and what you can't eat, I've never broken that. And this happens 3 times. And we understand, we have read the Scriptures enough and understand usually any time something happens 3 times, what is that an indication of? That's an indication of completeness, of I want you to understand. And the voice tells him what about what's clean and unclean? Yeah. What I have made clean, don't say that it's unclean. Now, when this is all over, Peter understands immediately what he's supposed to do, right? He understands immediately what all this is all about. Peter's sitting there scratching his head going, Okay. Does it mean I can have bacon for breakfast? I'm not sure. But, what does this mean? Now, David, if he's like you, wasn't a whole lot to scratch. He may have polished his head a little bit, but he can't figure out, what is this? At the same time that he's thinking, what is this all about? What's occurring? Exactly. Somebody's knocking on the door. Who are they looking for? They're looking for him. Who are they from? They're from Cornelius. They come in. What do? They relate to him the exact same thing that Cornelius has told them. They relate to him and say, and he was told to send for you, and guess what? We're here. We're here to get you. Now, as far as the timeline goes, what do? They wait till the next day. Why? We've got a long trip ahead of us. So the next day, they leave and they go. Now they get to Cornelius' house. What has Cornelius done? Ben, if we lived in the day and time, and an angel or an angel tells you, Ben, here's what I want you to do. I want you to send for this man, and this is the man I want you to bring to you who's going to tell you what you need to be doing. What are you thinking about that man? Is this guy that I'm sending for, is he just your everyday, ordinary individual? He must not be. I mean, he has been specifically mentioned and asked to come by an angel. And so, I don't know about you, he says, hey, he contacts all of his relatives and friends. Something big is going to happen. Now, does he know what big is going to happen? No, but surely, Glenn, it's got to be something great. It can't be some little thing. God knows what I've been doing. He's instructed me to go get this guy. Something big has got to happen. So Peter gets there and all of these individuals are here. So what does Cornelius do? Yeah, he walks in and Cornelius says, boom, to the ground. He's going to worship him. I don't know. Your name was spoken by an angel, and of course, Peter does what we would expect Peter to do. Peter does what? Man, you need to get up. I'm just a man just like you are. Cornelius then goes about to tell him, this is why I sent for you. And when Cornelius relates this story, Peter is like, I get it. He said, what do I perceive? What do I know now? God is not a respecter of persons. That's what this meant. He's telling me now. And so at this time, Peter starts talking to them and telling them what he needs to tell them. He's telling them about Christ, and he's telling them, and so the gospel, the good message, he's relaying this information to them. Before Peter gets completely through with the message, something happens that is just don't. Matter of fact, this will be only the second time this ever happens. What happens? The Holy Spirit comes upon them. And again, this is not, hey, the Spirit will be with you when you're baptized kind of thing. This is like, as Peter says, he said, this is just like what happened to us. And since this happened to them just like it happened to us, who can do what? Who can refuse them baptism? You see, and sometimes the idea is, why this miraculous Spirit coming upon them, but they haven't been baptized yet? What is the Spirit coming upon them? What does that have to do because they haven't been baptized yet? What is this? This is God's stamp of approval to say, yes, I except the Gentiles. Now, what if that had never happened? Peter goes, hey, I get it. God's telling me that the Gentiles are accepted. I'm going to go ahead and baptize them. You think Peter would have had anybody upset with him when he got back? Yes. What do you mean? What do you mean baptizing Gentiles? Don't you know they're not a part of this? But this is God's stamp of approval to say, they are acceptable unto me. And so they're baptized. And again, it's not like they said, okay, got the Spirit, and you know what? That's it. We don't need to do no more. What happens? He and his household are baptized. Now, we get over into, and then he asked him to stay with us and teach us some more. You think there's anything else Cornelius wants to know? I bet there's a lot of things Cornelius wants to know. But chapter 11, where does Peter go? He goes what? He goes back to Jerusalem. And again, this idea of saying, I'm glad I was prepared properly. When he gets back to Jerusalem, he is going to tell those at Jerusalem exactly what all happened. Now, what we get in reading chapter 11, and we put it with chapter 10, when Peter goes back and he's explaining to the church there what has happened, does he have to say, just take my word for it? Just take my word for it. Yeah, I was the only one there. Trust me, this is what happened. The Spirit fell on them. And God's telling me that they need to be baptized, so I baptized them. Just take my word for it. He had other people with him. They were witnesses to what went on. And that kind of takes me back to what I started with, is if there's one thing we can find out from the Scriptures, when God sends His people out, and guess what? You're His people, and He has sent you out. When God sends out His people, He does not send you ill-prepared. You remember when they were going out when He was sending them out to preach and teach, and what did He tell them they had to prepare and take care of? Don't worry about it, just go do it. Right? Just go do it. And when you stand in front of these kings and all these rulers and everything, what? The Spirit will tell you what it is that you need to say. Now, that miraculous thing we don't have today. But has He given you everything that you need to be prepared for whatever it is that you run into and everything that you do? He has. He has thoroughly furnished us with the Word. And so Peter didn't get back and say, oh man, if I'd known that was going to happen, I'd have taken some people with me to be witnesses to this, because I need somebody to back me up. I should have taken some people. There were people with him. When we go out as children of God, God has prepared us. Now, we can go into a whole discussion of what that means, but when if I put before you a whole toolbox of tools and say, here's everything you're going to need for this job, that's one thing. The problem is, do I know how to use all the tools that are in that toolbox? The other day I looked in my toolbox and I was trying to get something undone, and you guys who have done some mechanic work, this, and I got to looking, what I was looking for? I was looking for my cheater bar. Because I was about to kill myself trying to get something undone, and I could not get it undone. Now, if you don't know what a cheater bar is, it's just that. It helps you cheat. Not in a bad way. You put a wrench or a ratchet on something and you're trying to get it undone and you just can't get it. But I'm going to tell you what, you add a piece of pipe to it about that long, that whole science thing of having a longer lever, you slide that little piece of pipe on there that's about 4 foot long, and buddy, you can twist the head right off of a nut if you want to. But if you don't know that, if that piece of pipe had just been laying there and you look at it and go, well, I have no idea what that's for. Don't know what to use that for. We've been given the toolbox. The thing we need to do is we need to learn how to use the tools that are in it. Scott has been talking to the class about evangelism and the tools that we have available to us and using those in conjunction with the Word. And sometimes we sit back and we say, I can't do this. The problem is we can't do that because I haven't ever learned to use the tools that would allow me to do that. And we've got to get in and use those tools. This story is such a good story on so many levels. The most obvious that we study all the time is that the gospel, from this point, the gospel is open to everyone. Now, is this going to solve all of their problems now that the gospel is open to the Gentiles? Absolutely not. Because what's going to be one of the constant running themes as going around? It's those Judaizing teachers and all this stuff. And what's their concept? Well, if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to need to obey these parts of the law. You're going to need to be circumcised. You're going to need to do. And if you notice here, Peter never said you need to be baptized and you need to be circumcised. They were just baptized. So this opens the door. It doesn't mean when they open the door that all problems are gone. Everything's going to be taken care of now and we're not going to have any more problems. It will continue to be a problem. When a person becomes a child of God, does that mean all of their problems are going to be solved? Does that mean they're not going to struggle with something that they've had in their life before? No. Struggle, problems, those things continue. And it is a process of learning how to take the tools that we have before us, learning to use them properly, having a knowledge of what the Word says to help us get through those things. So the kingdom is opened to everybody. Also the idea of that when Peter and when you look over in verse 11, over in chapter 11, when Peter relays this information to them, and he tells them, here's what all happened. He's got the witnesses that are there to verify that fact. The people that he is explaining it to and sharing it with back in Jerusalem, what is their response to what has happened? Thank you. They glorify God that it is now open to the Gentiles. They glorify God. Now think about it. They have been raised from generation to generation to generation to generation to believe that the Gentiles were outside of the covenant. And matter of fact, not only are they outside of the covenant, they aren't deserving of the covenant. And now they are. You ever looked at somebody and thought, that person's so bad they don't deserve the gospel? God's never looked at anybody and said they don't deserve the gospel. A good story on a lot of different levels. Christianity's open to all, and God will prepare you for what it is that you need to do. Peter didn't go unprepared. Peter had what he needed. He didn't understand when he first left, but it all made sense. And as a matter of fact, he's told, when the Spirit's talking to Peter, it says, go without Go without questioning. Don't ask any questions. If they ask you to go, you just go. And God has said to me and you, He said, go. All right. Good to have y'all tonight.
Our first song tonight will be number 821. 821. Oh, that blessed rock of ages, I am trusting God, dear Lord, in thee I'm trusting. Keep me till my journey's ended, keep me till thy blessed face I see. I need your blessed rock of ages, I be till thy blessed face I see, thy face I see in glory. When the storm around me rages, blessed rock of ages, hide thou me. Keep me when the storm clouds gather, keep me till the sun comes shining through the shadows. Keep me till my work is over, keep me till I bid this world adieu. I need your blessed rock of ages, I be till thy blessed face I see, thy face I see in glory. When the storm around me rages, blessed rock of ages, hide thou me. When my journey is completed, Savior, and there's no more work to do, oh blessed Savior, guide my weary spirit to that happy land beyond the blue. I need your blessed rock of ages, I be till thy blessed face I see, thy face I see in glory. When the storm around me rages, blessed rock of ages, hide thou me.
Matthew chapter 12, Jesus has, by this time in his ministry, he's developed quite a following, and a lot of people are paying attention to Jesus, and they're hanging on every word, and they're looking at every action that he does, and they're just packed around him. And is at that time in Matthew chapter 12, verse 46, while he was speaking to the people, behold, his mother and his brothers stood outside asking to speak to him. We have a little bit of information of course, about Jesus and his interaction with his parents, the way that, they sought him when he was 12 and he was in the temple and they had left Jerusalem without him. But we know so little about Jesus and his family and his interactions with his family. And it is fascinating to think about. It's so intriguing to think what it was like to be in the household of Jesus. People have speculated that he was doing miraculous things all during his childhood and among his, the kids that were his age. But I've got to think that other than being perfect, which I'm sure they appreciated, his brothers and sisters appreciated, he just was a son to Jewish parents and a brother to Jewish children, and really wasn't anything that they thought was extraordinary. Of course, his mother and his father knew from his birth what special things were said about him, but probably growing up in the household of Jesus was pretty much like growing up in any household. And so they're perplexed as to why it is that this crowd is, why is he now focused on these people and this ministry instead of his family? In response to the request that they pass through the crowd onto him, he says in verse 48, he replied to the man who told him, "Who is my mother? And who are my brothers?" And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." What his earthly family failed to understand was that Jesus was preparing a much, much larger family. They could be a part of it, of course. Jesus is not denying that they are his kin, but he is defining for all what makes us family with Christ, how special it is to be part of that family, and we know the way to do that. Tom was saying in his class this evening that God has equipped us, God has given us the thing that we need, this knowledge of His Word, the knowledge of the will of God that we have in the gospel. And we who know that will, who know how to respond in faith to the will of God, we know how to be a brother and sister and mother to Jesus. How wonderful that is. Tonight, if you're not part of that family, if you're not part of the family of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, you have the knowledge, you have the capability, you have this word from Him, from Christ, the word of His death and burial and resurrection, and you can respond to that word. You can respond to the will of God for you in Christ Jesus, putting Him on in baptism, responding to Him in penitent faith. If there's a way that we can be of assistance to you tonight in becoming part of that family, or if have the direction of your life has taken you away from the family of Christ, turn back tonight. If there's a way that we can be of assistance to you tonight, let us know. We'll stand and sing to encourage you to come.
Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you washed in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Lay aside the garments that are stained with sin, and be washed in the blood of the Lamb. There's a fountain flowing for the soul unclean. Oh, be washed in the blood of the Lamb. Are you washed in the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb? Are your garments spotless? Are they white as snow? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?
Would you please bow with me? Our Father who art in heaven, we're so thankful for another opportunity that we've had to gather together to study from your word, to sing praises unto thee, and to bring our petitions unto you, dear Lord. We're so thankful for this privilege that we have to be your children and to be your family. We're so thankful, dear Lord, for the blessings you so richly bestow upon us each and every day. And help us to be good stewards of those blessings, and help us to look to the world around us that is in such dire need of you. And help us, dear Lord, that we might be an example unto them, that we might take your word into this world. Please go with us the rest of this week. Keep us safe and well. Please be with the Hogan family, dear Lord, and all those that are suffering and with loss, and those that are suffering with illness. Keep us safe and well. Let's make this prayer in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Well, good evening. I appreciate everybody being here this evening. Thank you so much for spending your Wednesday here. Some quick announcements to quickly go through before we are dismissed. The Old Goats will meet tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. in the fellowship hall for a time of study and fellowship. The ladies' class will not meet tomorrow. The church picnic will be this Sunday, April the 28th at Sharon Johnston Park, Pavilion number 2. There will be no evening services at the building that day. Lunch is at 1. The ice cream truck is at 2. I want to flip those. But anyway, regardless. Okay, the ice cream truck's at 2. Cornhole tournament is from 2 to 4. Singing in Devos at 4. We'll be having hamburgers and hot dogs, and drinks will be provided, but please bring side dishes, lawn chairs, and cornhole boards if you have them. Please sign up for the cornhole tournament by tonight. Please wear your team making shirt that Sunday. I think if we don't get enough players to sign up, I think Chris wins by default, and we can't have that. So we've got to get more players on the team. So, all righty. The next Monday night for the Master will be Monday, April the 29th at 6 p.m. Please sign up at the back table if you'll be eating dinner, and if you can help with a meal cleanup. Girls' Day is coming up Saturday, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. Saturday, May the 4th at 9 a.m. Register online now at our website and invite your friends. And the only announcement I have for the youth is those going to the RCYC retreat. The van will leave this Friday at 4:30 and will be back on Sunday at 11:30. We'll quickly scan the elders and see if there's any other announcements. Unless somebody else has something, we are dismissed. Have a wonderful week.